Thank you everyone for coming. I don't do the Instagram videos. It's the first thing, so the quality of these might not be quite as good as what people are used to. But I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to demo the Turismo system here, which is our complete kind of everything there system off the shelf. And then I'm going to, in this case, I've got some new bits I'm going to show, and some some kind of like in production kind of beta stuff. But please keep that secret. Right, so Turismo system is kind of got a bit of everything. Our kind of favourites, we kind of based it on systems that we were using. So, you know, you could sort of pretty much knock out full tracks, or at least kind of the most of them, I guess. And I'm going to sort of work through like a kind of simple track, and I'm going to talk through what I'm doing and what I'm patching, and sort of give you a rough idea of what it does. I think I'm going to do a Q&A at the end, but if anybody wants to sort of like just jump in and ask me anything, then please do. If anything's like not making sense, like I'll go easy anyway. So in the middle here, I've got Pam, which is kind of like our most famous module, I guess. It's kind of clocking, modulation, does a bit of everything. I set a BPM, and then off that BPM, I have kind of 8 outputs which are kind of correlated to that. They could be multiples, divisions. They can output triggers. Based on that, they could output like LFOs, but everything kind of goes back to that kind of central BPM. So you can use it for very sort of simple things, or for, you know, like a full, almost like a full sequencer, or for like modulation, all sorts of things. You know, and the nice thing about it as well is because I guess the interface is sort of non-conventional for doing them kind of things. You have a lot of sort of happy accidents, and kind of just, it always kind of like sounds good because it correlates back to this BPM. So it's quite a fun module as well, even though it's kind of menu based, I guess. So I'm going to go to the first output, and I'm going to patch that into the squid. And then the squid is a sampler. Basically, 8-channel sampler, load samples off USB, or you can record into it, and then it has 4 outputs, and you can kind of divide up the 8 channels across them 4 outputs. The last 3 outputs are sort of special in that they can be pitched. And it's kind of like, the sort of inspiration was for it to be more like a sort of like old kind of like 90s rack mount sampler where you kind of feel your way more with it rather than depend on these kind of like waveform displays and that kind of thing. Again, just wanted something that would sort of lead more to sort of like fun and happy accidents rather than like an iPad app just stuck in the modular kind of thing. So I'm just going to patch a ×1 clock. You can see it flashing there. I'm going to patch that into channel 1, which has a bass drum, and we should get like a 4/4 pattern. This is a little mixer here, the Megatang. So I'm going to go into that, and we should get a little bass drum. So now I've got a bass drum. I'm going to add a hand clap, I think. Yeah, so obviously, you know, I want that clap on every other beat. So I'm going to halve the speed of it on Pam. And then I'm also going to shift it so it goes on the downbeat. I can see I can go into each output on Pam, and then I can adjust various parameters, one of which is the phase, which will shift it. So if I now stop and start it, you'll hear that it will go bass drum, hand clap, bass drum, hand clap. So I'm now going to add some hats, and I'm going to use the ASQ here, which is kind of like, at its core, it's kind of like it's basically a step sequencer, and it has 2 CV gate outputs, and then 4 trigger outputs, and a quantizer. And the actual kind of step sequencing is based on the old Roland SH101, where you kind of key in each step kind of thing. It's quite sort of a sort of basic way of programming, but you get, it's quite fun, and you can get quite interesting sort of sequences out of it. But first I need to sync that up to Pam. So I'm going to give it a ×4 clock. From one output, and then I'm also going to patch a special output from Pam, which is a stop output, which will just fire a trigger when Pam stops, and that'll reset the sequencer back to the beginning. So you should see now, there we go. Of course, right, so I'm just going to clear this. So I'm just going to set this, I'm using the trigger output here, you can see the LED, and then I've just set the length to be 2 bars. And then I'm going to do some hats with that. So I'm going to patch one into there, and then we'll do like a... And then I'm going to go to the next channel, and I'm just going to clear that. And set that to a couple of bars as well, and then I'm going to put that into an open hat, and we'll just go like. And I'm just going to go into the squid and shorten that open hat a bit by just adjusting the decay a little bit. Yeah, so now I've got a basic drum pattern going. So one of the things Pam will let you do of the outputs is it will, I'm going to make this a ×4, and I'm going to patch that into this one. Just going to, which is a bit much. But what I'm going to do is, obviously that's a bit of a boring pattern, so I'm going to apply an Euclidean pattern to it, which is kind of like a kind of mathematical equation that divides like a number of triggers within a number of steps sort of equidistantly, so it will always sound. Oh, is that me too? It's all right. So I don't know if you can see on the screen. I've set the step number to 16, and then I'm going to set the triggers to like an odd number. Let's try 7. And then I can also rotate them a bit so they're a bit more interesting. Yeah, so now I've got like more of a basic drum pattern going. So I'm now going to add a bass line. Oh, well, no, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to just split these. I'm just going to put the bass drum on its own channel. So. And then, yeah, so the bass drum's on its own channel, and then I can. And now I'm going to add a bass line, and I'm going to use the Tasmo here, which is analog voice, analog oscillator rather, which has various outputs. I'm going to use this varying shape output here. I'll just bring this in. Bring that down. And then I'm going to use like a square wave, and I'm going to run that through a filter, which is the filter here. And then we can bring that down a bit. And then I'm going to sequence that with, I'm going to mult the gate coming out, and I'm going to mult that into oh no, actually I'm going to send, I'm going to use the I'm going to use the Quade Megaslope here, and I'm going to use that in envelope mode, so it gives me like a 5-stage envelope, but I'm just going to use it simply, and then I'm going to take the output of that into a mult, which I'm then going to patch into the Megatang, which has like a VCA on it, and then I'm also going to patch it into the filter, just to control the cutoff a bit. And then you should, if I just, yeah, so I'll start that playing again. And then what I'm going to do is, rather than programming in step time, I'm just gonna key it in. So I hit the store button and then something like that. You know what, I'm going to actually program that in because it will sound better if I program it in. So I'm just going to go into the store mode, and then basically I'm just going to count 16 steps. So I'm going to go one, I'm going to have like 3 stabs, then 2 rests. I have one of them, another rest, then another rest, then a rest, rest, rest. And then I've got my bass line, and I can so next up I am going to add some chords, and to add the chords I'm going to use the sizzle module here, which is a digital oscillator, which is very much modelled. It uses like phase distortion synthesis, kind of like FM, but you kind of shift the phase instead. And the kind of flavour of phase distortion synthesis that this uses is very much based on the Casio CZ the old sort of Casio CZ, which has kind of like some very kind of specific features, like the sort of resonance waveform it uses to sort of emulate like filter resonance, and some other kind of specific things like the way it does the noise and the ring mod and stuff. So I'll just patch straight in from that, and then we can have a listen. So that's just a single voice, and then if I turn the chord control, then you'll see it start going through the chords. I think that's a minor, something like that. And then these obviously control, you know, the sort of flavour of the thing. I'm going to go for the ring mod. And then I'm going to use another channel of the ASQ. So I'm going to patch the CV into the voltage per octave. I'm going to take the gate again into the. I'm going to take the gate into the pip slope this time, which is kind of like a small attack decay type envelope, which loops as well. And yeah, then I'm going to patch out of that into the mult again, and I'm going to take one of the mults again into the Megatank, use it as a VCA, and then the other output I'm going to put into the I'm going to modulate the shape, I think, just to give it a bit of movement, and then. Yeah, that sounds nice. So I think this time I will attempt again to, I'll set this playing. Oh, let me just clear that. And then I'm just going to key something else in. So, oh, I don't know why we didn't hear that. Why didn't we hear that? Oh, because I didn't have record pressed. Okay. And I'm just going to slow that down a bit as well. All right, and then I'm just going to slow that. I'm just going to slow that down, so then it's a frequent, and hopefully. I can overdub that as well, so I'm actually going to clear that. And then just. Yeah, that's sounding okay. Let's just. Okay. And then, so that's sounding all right. And then next up, we'll add, I'm going to use a PAM channel just with a bit of random. So I'm just going to select a different waveform for the output. I'm just going to select like the little random waveform, and then I'm going to patch that into one of the sizzle inputs just to give it a little bit of movement. Going to, on the Megatank it has a little effects end, and I'm just going to patch that into the MFX, which is kind of like our multi-effects unit. So just going to patch that in here, make sure it can stand up. And then I've got MFX has various different programs. But I'm just going to go for like a little, I'm going to go for a delay. Ping pong delay. And then I'm going to take a PAM output and clock it with that so the delays are in time. And then I'll send a that delay a bit now, so it wasn't quite. And I'm going to add a bit of that to the cymbals as well. And then I can just start, tweaking away, just adjusting. I can bring stuff in and out on the. That's with the delay a bit. And I'm gonna take a final PAM output. Again with a bit of random. I'm just going to slow it down. And then I'm just going to apply that to the amount of feedback on the delay line. Just going to. But yeah, hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of what you can do with Turismo. And also there's like a MIDI interface. There's a MIDI interface as well, and then there's like a Mega Milton which has like a noise source and some other little bits and pieces, and like an extra channel in there. So, but that gives you like a good quick idea of sort of what it does. Yeah, and then on to this case, and this case is just a case I bought from the office, which has some new bits and pieces in it. So we have the MCO here, which is like a it's basically a synth voice with lots and lots of different engines in it. It's got like a virtual analog engine. It's got like a JD 8000 engine in it. It's got like a wavetable engine, a vocoder, a bass drum, bass sort of sound, and also a 4-man engine. Oh, and even the old Sid Guts is in it as well. I'm not going to demo that though, because that's kind of like, there's lots of demos online of that, and they'll sound a lot better. And it really is fantastically sounding. But you kind of it's not knobby. You have to sort of work it through the menus and stuff. But it's still pretty easy to use. It doesn't take up much space. And then I also have recent releases, this PIP filter here and PIP LFO. I used the PIP slope before, which is like our small 4 HP envelope. Then we have the PIP filter, which is kind of like a bit like an MS-20 style filter. I think it's I can't remember if it's a 2-pole or 3-pole, but it's quite mild, and it has a trigger input and has a little VCA built into it. And it sounds nice though, it's a nice sounding. And then we've got this PIP LFO, which is kind of like an analog LFO with unipolar and bipolar outputs, all the kind of like usual shapes. The trick it also does is it'll run as kind of a VCO as well in VCO mode, and it'll track like 5 octaves, and actually sounds pretty good. It's basically a stripped down Tasmo, a very stripped down Tasmo. Yeah, and then the other thing I've got here, which is well, no, let's do so also here I've got the stem ripper. No, I'm going to do the FMCo first. So when we originally developed the Sizzle, it did CZ synthesis and FM synthesis, but we kind of reached the conclusion that it was just kind of quite convoluted and complicated trying to do both, and we couldn't get the panel and whatnot to kind of sit in the same way. And also the CZ sounding came out sounding a lot better than we expected. So we basically pulled all the FM code out, which we'd spent quite a lot of time getting a decent sounding FM, because we do some FM modules which use like the old Yamaha chips, and we sort of spent quite a lot of time getting it to sound sort of nearly as good as them in terms of like the sort of true like Yamaha FM sound, where you have like the real fizz and the kind of aliasness to it. But I'd say that but at the same time we wanted kind of like a bit of a cleaner FM sound as well. So I think it has like the waveforms and whatnot, but the actual FM sound is a little bit cleaner. So anyway, what we did was we basically made the FMCo, which is kind of like, it's basically the same hardware as a Sizzle, but it's reduced down a lot in size, and it has an FM engine in it. But we've never actually shipped it kind of officially, because we didn't want to keep releasing like VCO after VCO after VCO. So we did like a small run of about 30 of them, I think, and then we sort of take them along. We sold them at a pop-up, and I've got some here today if anybody wants one. Yeah, so we thought it would be a cool thing for people that come to events, and they can get something that's quite special and unique. But I suspect we will release it at some point, but I don't know when that'll be. But I will give a quick demo of that. So I'm going to come, let me just quickly patch this up. So hopefully it's not going to, I'll just take like a raw. So this is the waveform control, this is the ratio, it's just like 2 op FM, and then I can decouple the ratio, so it's not like an integer factor, so it's a lot more sort of harsh sounding rather than sort of steppy this. And then this is the amount of an index control for the amount of FM, and then a waveform as well. What is cool about it though is it has a chord mode. And it also has a trigger input, which is normal, and then it has like a little decay envelope built in, so it becomes like a complete voice. So I'm going to put it on I'll just put it on a PAM channel. I'm just going to take a panel, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some probability to that channel. So it's got like a 44% chance of firing, and then I'm going to loop that randomness, so I get a little loop. I'm just going to loop it on 8 beats and then patch that in. I can voltage control all them knobs, so it's just twiddling them. So I'll patch one of them into the. Let's go to the yeah, so hopefully that gives you an idea of how that sounds. And I've got 5 here, and I think they're $2.50 each if anybody wants one. Speak to someone from Signal. This man here, maybe. Right, so I've got one more thing to go. So here I've got the, oh, can you see it? Yeah. So I've got the stem ripper here, which is our newest module. This is basically designed so you can just capture patches in a multi-track way, basically. For ages, I've used like my home setup. I use this 8-input ADAT module, which connects to an RME interface, which then will record onto like a USB disk. so I could like capture patches while I was playing. I could just patch through this ADAT module, and I could capture patches in kind of like a multi-track way, record them to the drive, and then I could pull them into my DAW, and then I could edit them and just had a bit more control over them rather than just like a stereo recording. And I'd always wanted to sort of get that in a single module. So it was just always in my case, and I could just sort of patch through it. And then if I wanted to capture a patch, I could capture it in like a multi-track way, like capture the drums, the bass, like whatever, the effects returns all in their own channels, so I could then put it into the computer and edit away later. And that's what the stem ripper basically is. It's basically 8 inputs, 8 audio inputs, fairly wide bandwidth on them all, like 20 volts peak to peak, and then it will record to an SD card, to like a multi-track WAV file. And literally I patch stuff in, and then I just hit the record button, and then off it goes, and I can leave that going for hours, assuming the SD card's big enough. But I have like a terabyte SD card I use, and it records the files to the SD card, and it has like a battery back clock in it as well, so it stamps. The files are all named with the date of when they were created, and then I can kind of edit away. The actual module itself is 6 HP, but then we do an expander, which is just basically a pass-through. At home I'll use it with mults just to save space. But there's this expander module here which lets you pass through. And that's it basically. Yeah. Thank you. I will happily take any questions.
What's the sample rate and resolution on the stem ripper?
On the stem ripper at the moment, it currently runs at 16-bit 41, the same, it's like CD quality. The issue is I can run it faster, but the issue is SD cards, and SD cards being reliable. Like at the moment, you need like a U3 card for it to work, and I haven't had a U3 card fail on me at that rate, but if you run it at like 24, then that becomes, it's very problematic. It becomes very problematic. And also, I don't know, I'd be surprised I don't know if like at 24-bit, all you're really capturing is noise in terms of like, unless you've got like some super high-end, carefully made Eurorack system. Like most Eurorack, the noise level is at like -70, and like, and 16-bit will take you to like nearly 100. I might add it as an option, but I just think it'll be more of a, it'll be good as like a marketing point, but I think practically, I don't know how much value it is beyond making it more of a pain.
Design decisions or interface decisions, Sizzle is a full width, 20 something HP, and your FM module's smaller.
Yeah.
What made you make those decisions, I suppose, or what are any guiding factors when you think about interface design?
I don't know. I think it's just it's probably playing to the market a bit more than anything in terms of, I don't know, to be honest. Like, I think that's probably the challenge as well of doing that effort, just to see if we could get it in a smaller size. And I guess, just kind of like, I guess as well, because we already have the castle, which is like ginormous in terms of like FM. And I guess kind of maybe the challenge of getting an FM module in like 8 HP, Yeah, but not quite as small as the MCO, which is kind of the extreme, I guess.
Did you ever think of doing an MCO with more breakout controls and so on? Or did you ever prototype it like that?
No, it was always going to be small. It was always going to be the same size as the MFX. Like you can make it more usable with the Axon, but we have got all them engines there. We have like played around with kind of like other things using like the engine. So I think, yeah, it's like with the MFX, like we did the pedal and stuff, and it made itself, it made the code, made itself into like plugins and stuff. We do plugins. So I think that same thing will happen with some of the MCO engines. Yeah, definitely.
You guys have a lot of like modules based on like very specific old hardware, like the CZ and all that. What about like that kind of gear sort of, you know, inspires you as a designer, I guess, to sort of like what's interesting to you?
Probably just because it's what I'm sort of most familiar with and sort of what I'm most passionate about, I guess, and find, you know, kind of interesting, especially sort of like early digital stuff, that kind of thing, you know. Yeah, and also in terms of like, it kind of fits well with the kind of like hardware capabilities that we can sort of reasonably get at. You know, like we're not Apple, we can't get like we basically using like, you know, 10-year-old, you know, hardware. So, you know, it kind of fits well with what we can get at, and just knowing it well and it being sort of familiar and liking it a lot, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Have you ever thought, so on that note, have you ever thought of doing a kind of more full-fat wavetable influence, like a PPG wavetable? I know you've got wavetable engines in the MCO and stuff like that, but it feels like that might be a...
Yeah, no, definitely. Like a sort of more kind of higher, like I think the wavetable in the MCO and also like the MCO before it is quite kind of like low-endish. I guess, you know, more kind of like early wavetable stuff rather than more kind of like advanced later on wavetable stuff. But yeah, that's something, like we thought about doing that with the MCO wavetable engine, but then we kind of like the sort of grittiness of that. But yeah, no, definitely, yeah.
Could I just ask another point on interface? You've obviously made a conscious decision to put different sockets at different parts of the panel.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if there was anything that kind of guides you on how you're putting things where, rather than maybe grouping them together in one part of the module.
Well, there's no sort of like, they're generally just trying to get them at the top and the bottom and kind of just as sort of logical as we can, and sort of just keeping them out of the way of the controls, you know, just thinking how they'll be used.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say there's any, but also it can be like aesthetics as well, you know, just like what looks good to a degree, but a bit of everything really. But there's no sort of real hard and fast rules, but they'll go through a lot of revisions normally before they get released. You know, they'll go back because you'll think something will look good on the screen, and then you'll try it and you'll be like, no, this isn't right. And sometimes it can just be moving something a tiny bit, and then suddenly it's like, oh yeah, that works. It just sort of clicks.
I suppose, you know, because sometimes patch cables can obviously get in the way.
Yeah, definitely.
But you clearly make some decisions based on like getting enough space for ergonomics, like in the sizzle, for example, it looks like there's a good bit of space.
Yeah, definitely.
Are compressing it.
Yeah, and also it sort of works in terms of like, so when you develop the modules, you always want to try and get everything on one PCB, because obviously then it's a lot cheaper. You know, like you'll see modules where they have like 2 modules stacked, and so there's always that challenge, and you'll sort of place things so that will work well as well. And also, you know, I don't really like putting parts on the back. I don't like putting parts on the back because I sort of worry about them getting rubbed, you know. So yeah, it's sort of playing with all them sorts of constraints and various sort of other tricks as well, I guess. Yeah. Sort of part of the fun, playing with the constraints and trying to get around them.
So with you with like branding and visual identity of the stuff, how do you sort of balance having a consistent brand look with all the modules being quite individual? They've all got individual typefaces and stuff like that, and they're not as uniform as, say, Joanna Log or Surge and some of those other brands that are very grid-based. And
Yeah.
Lined up, they look like your stuff has a sort of unified feel. But like, what's your sort of design approach to making it feel unified yet?
Well, there is kind of like a language to everything, in terms of, you know, like we're quite careful. Like with there's only 2 font sizes. They're always the same. You know, there's always kind of like what are outputs, what are inputs, that kind of thing. But then, and there is kind of a grid, but the grid is very loose, you know, and yeah, like I don't know. I can look at it and see lots of errors. Like, well, why did I do that? You know, but generally it does follow like quite a loose grid. But then also as well, you know, when I got into this, it was like part of the attraction was, oh yeah, there aren't really any rules, you know, and that was kind of fun as well, because so much stuff nowadays is just like boring, you know, and you know, that's why I like doing like the titles and giving them fun names with interesting fonts, just to give them like a bit of soul and a bit of character, you know. Yeah, which I think works with them.
Yeah, it sort of feels like one instrument, even though...
Yeah. But sometimes like I look at like the Turismo and I think, oh God, why didn't I use the same font on all the titles? It would have looked so much better. But I'm so sort of cursed by knowledge, by kind of seeing it all the time, that I sort of think, oh, if I'd just seen that, then I wouldn't like it. You know, but then I kind of like that kind of like, you know, I don't want it to be, I always wanted it to be a bit more fun and, you know.
Glad you didn't. I think it's great that it's got all the different types.
Yeah, because you know, people, you know, they become like they just have a bit of soul, you know, and so much stuff nowadays doesn't kind of have that, you know, and it is one of the, it's sort of a where you can get away with that. It's sort of quite Wild West, but less so than it was. But you know, you can, like with the Pam and you know the font on the Pam and the naming on the Pam, it kind of like it all sort of came together with that.
I mean,
You know.
you could tie yourself up knots trying to make everything unified, but
Yeah.
to be in that system that
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Is there anyone else's design approach that you quite admire, either within Eurorack or
No. No, I'm being silly. Who else do I like? There are other ones that I like. I like dot for stuff. You know, I like how, you know, I like that that's all kind of like uniform and consistent. You know, I generally like anything that's sort of quite consistent. Don't like black panels very much. I like stuff like make noise and stuff like that. I like, you know, when it's a bit weird and a bit random, you know. Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I'll think of like a million things afterwards. Yeah, or maybe not.
What's your favorite module that you've made?
Probably the castle, probably Akemi's castle, I think. It's probably my sort of favourite, because that was kind of like a real uphill struggle to develop. Although, you know, and like, sort of, now it doesn't seem like it was that difficult, but at the time, it was quite a challenge, especially to get the like Yamaha chip working. And then when I did get it working, I was like, oh yeah, this is going to sound really good. Like I had it like just spewing out like random noise, and I thought, oh yeah, this is going to sound brilliant. And I had a lot of problems. I learned a lot with it, and also that was kind of like the point that it's sort of like Busy Circuits turned more into like an actual company rather than kind of like a side project, I guess. Yeah.
Are there any plans to add any firmware upgrades to any of the digital modules like the Squid? Or?
Well, the Squid is kind of like, the Squid is so packed now. You see, the problem is you get to a point where they become so like, they either kind of run out of space, like what happened with like the new workout, like that was like crazily out of space, or the code just becomes way beyond what it originally was, and it just, you know, we do an update and then it just brings in a load of new bugs. We fix some new bugs, you know, it just becomes like, it just reaches the kind of like end of its life. And so I would say like the Squid's pretty much full now. Maybe there'll be the odd bug fix release. The MFX is pretty full. The MCO's still got loads of room. The Sizzle will probably get like, you know, like we keep sort of minor updates. The PAM has got lots of room left on it. It's more having like ideas of what to put into the PAM now. You know, without a lot of the sort of, we get suggestions and stuff, but a lot of them is kind of like so niche that it would, you know, be useful to sort of one person in 1,000, you know. So again, it's kind of like keeping things manageable because we're like a really small team, and the more stuff you add, obviously there's always like an overhead. It's kind of like managing that. But like we all use the modules ourselves, so we want to update them as well. Like adding the time stretch to the squid and stuff like that was something that I'd wanted to do for ages for myself. Yeah. Yeah, so there will be updates. Maybe even for the squid. I don't know. I said there wouldn't be any more, and then we did one. So,
So everything you've got here is Eurorack. I know you have the MFX pedal.
Yeah.
Something of a running joke with Signal Sounds that we try and convince every manufacturer we speak to make a drum machine.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about doing stuff outside of Eurorack and do like more sort of, basically just outside
Well,
of the
we
Eurorack?
have like a sub brand called Zon. There's another company called Zon which makes 500 series modules.
Okay.
But we've never sort of public. There's only like one thing, but we've not sort of
Drum machine, though, isn't it?
It's not a drum machine. It's not a drum machine.
So we're not interested in that.
With the buttons, we're all dreaming about it.
Oh, what like yeah? I don't know. I don't really. I don't know.
8 Dinkies Taiko.
Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I don't. It would be. But we kind of have this. We kind of have the. Yeah, maybe.
We've already got the clacky buttons. Just
Oh yeah, like a clacky button. Yeah, maybe. I never sort of really.
just put Pams and Squid and the ASQ together into a nice big desktop.
Yeah, like I would like to do something sort of. I would like to do something sort of Pammy like that, but I just never had a good idea. A good way of sort of fitting it together. But yeah, no, maybe that isn't. It could be. I'll give me a week. No, no, yeah, maybe. I just but I think one of the things is it takes so much effort to get from like an idea to a sort of shipping product. Is you really need I'm so.
Competitive market as well.
Yeah, and it's a very competitive market. So you've got to be careful that you don't spend like years on something and then, just the week before you launch it, someone does exactly the same thing, but maybe better and cheaper, that kind of thing. There's always that risk. And also, it is, Busy Sex is a company now, it's got responsibilities, it employs people, so we have to be more careful more than when it was sort of just me on my own. So it is kind of like managing a lot of factors. But anyway, I think, like for me, I don't know, I just really need something that I'm sort of get really passionate about and motivated so I can kind of stick with it and see it to the end. And I have a lot of drum machines.
Where's your biggest territory for selling modules to?
Where do we sell most of them to? America.
What about Japan?
We don't really sell that much in Japan. We sell a little bit, but yeah, not as much as you'd.
Okay, after America?
Yeah, probably Europe, UK, probably about on par, I would say. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but America.
EU and UK are the same.
I don't know. They used to be, but then this Brexit thing happened, and now I would guess that EU is maybe small. I don't know. It's probably smaller. I don't know because I don't really look at the.
That's roughly the same for us, though. Like we sell very little into Japan.
Yeah.
Because 40% of the world, EU 30, 20.
Yeah.
Very roughly.
Yeah, I would say about the same. Like, and we only really sell to like Schneider's and kind of like a few other Europe because it's just too much of a hassle, and Schneider's take the bulk of our business anyway, in terms of like selling into Europe. Yeah, which is unfortunate,
So
but.
a best-selling module, would that be about 1,000 units or something?
Oh, what do you want? Like the.
Starting a
Can you give us
business.
a quarterly?
Yeah. Yeah, it really depends. It varies so much. Like it's such a kind of like, like I'm sure it's so like such an up and down kind of business, and like it's completely like COVID was completely insane, and it's very different now to COVID and yeah, it's always changing. Like Pam's our bestseller, but what is at number 2 fluctuates a lot, you know. Yeah.
Against
Yeah.
that backdrop, I think what's coming out is the market's really competitive and it's getting more competitive. Is the market increasing, or is it stagnant in overall terms? If you have a few,
I think it's.
Eurorack?
I would say that it's probably still very slowly growing, but nothing like what it was. Like, I think you had COVID, and then it dived a bit, and then I think it's kind of recovered, and then it's sort of, I'd say it's sort of slowly growing. You know, and it's you know, there's a lot, but it's sort of a different market as well now. You know, there's like some things that I would think would sell, like the Tasmo does terribly because there's so many like oscillators out there, and we did that like right at the end of COVID, so we've still got units left over from then, you know, which is kind of crazy. But I'm sure if we'd have released that like a year before, we would have sold like 4 times as many. You know, it's weird, and it's sort of. I think as well as it's grown, it's become a lot more kind of there's a lot of kind of like different groups within it. You know, it used to be like one like people on Mod Wiggler, that was it. Now it seems like there's all different kind of groups of people using modular, and also a lot more sort of casual kind of users. You know, where I don't know, where they've probably got tons of music. They've got a big studio, and then they've just got this like Eurorack in the corner they may play with now and then, you know, but they're not like obsessive about it, you know, that kind of thing. It's a lot more sort of normal nowadays.
How much does like ALM's kind of brand image come into when you're designing modules? Like, are you ever thinking, you know, I can't, you know, this idea doesn't fit?
Well, yeah, we definitely have. I definitely have yeah, no, definitely, and that's so. There's definite rules in terms of like visually, like there's like the knobs and the there's like the parts themselves, and then like I said from day one, I'd never use a toggle switch. I like toggle switches, but then I don't know. So, and like just making sure that kind of like we always save state when you power down, which there's one module which doesn't do that well, but pretty much everything does. Kind of, you know, I can turn this off and turn it on and it'll be in the exact same state. I hate modules where I turn off the modular, turn it back on, and it's in some different state. So there's things like that, and so I guess sort of not following them would be breaking the kind of rules, and they are quite sort of hard, I guess. Yeah.
But you don't think that there's like, you know, modules that you wouldn't want to make just to like conform with?
Oh, in terms of like,
More of like, you know,
in terms of like functionality, like, no, I don't think so. Well, do you have like an example, like how you're?
Well, I was just thinking about it, like kind of when you were talking about the previous question. I can't remember who asked it about like, you know, focusing on like older hardware.
Oh, I see what you mean. In terms of like, yeah, I guess like, I don't know, like we've never done a granular thing, but I just think, you know, I don't know, unless we've got like a really good different take on something, then we wouldn't do it. You know, like, and like even with the MCO, like the MCO doesn't have anything grand. We did try and make the engines in that kind of as different, not sort of as different, but definitely with our own sort of flavour or spin on things, you know, rather than just sort of, oh yeah, bass drum engine, you know, virtual analog, you know, just kind of like cookie cutter by the numbers approach, you know. Yeah.
What's been your experience kind of, because you guys have been doing more like plugins lately. What's been sort of the experience in terms of like the differences of, because obviously it's a completely different thing, but like getting into the plugin market with these like little kind of individual algorithms and stuff, how has that kind of gone for you guys? And
Well, it's gone okay.
yeah.
We did it more because we could.
Yeah.
Without, I don't mean that, and like it wasn't that much effort. Like we had the code, like the
Just port it.
yeah, it was kind of like relatively easy to pour, and it was, but that we spent a lot of time trying to get like our own kind of like UI language, whatever, you know, trying to get its own little look and feel. Yeah, and that took the most effort. Like I think the market's much bigger than Euro, and why we're kind of like established in Euro. We're kind of nobodies in plugin land. So, yeah, like it does all right, but it's done nowhere. It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't pay anyone's salary, you know. But then it's fun, you know. It's nice to have them, and they're relatively easy to do, and the kind of support is a lot less overhead. That kind of, you know. Yeah. And I think it's good for the sort of brand, you know. It's sort of peaks, and we might have a hit, you know, with it one day, you know. And also, I think with the software, why we did it as well originally is because sort of historically with the Euro stuff, the sales really dip over summer, and then that kind of stopped over COVID, and then they dipped again, and then we were told by SSL actually that software stays pretty constant, so we were like, let's try that. It does stay pretty constant, but it's like pretty low down there. Yeah. Thank you.